Let's get this started. Firstly, I want to thank everyone for coming. Can everyone see my screen? Are we good? Alrighty, perfect. So thank you all so much for coming to this. It was an honor to be asked to do this by Mitchell. I'm very excited to talk about show writing as it's something I'm super passionate about. And it's something that I'm lucky enough to do every day now. So hooray for that. Mitchell told me that a lot of you are theater majors, and same, I was a theater major not too long ago. So we're really going to dive into the differences between writing for theater and writing for themed entertainment. I wanted this presentation to also be beginner friendly because maybe not everyone knows exactly what a show writer does. So we're going to kind of go over what that is, the responsibilities, and maybe some deliverables. But I also want it to be meaningful to those who may already know a lot about show writing. So I sprinkled in some things that I've learned while I've been a professional show writer. And of course, we will have time for questions at the end. But let's talk about me first. Of course, it's always great to talk about yourself, right? That was a joke. But I am a professional show writer. I've worked with a bunch of wonderful companies and I've had wonderful experiences with every single one of them. I'm currently an independent contractor, and I'm working with a few companies, which include Hawk Moon Creative and Orange Block Creative. So definitely check those guys out on LinkedIn. I've worked with places like Disney Cruise Line on new experiences for the Wish. I've worked with Disney Parks Live Entertainment. I was the show writing intern there in 2019. I did that right out of college. And I've also worked with RWS Entertainment Group in creative development, creating shows for Broadway and also other themed entertainment experiences. So here's a little mood board of things I've been a part of. I've included some portfolio projects that I've been a part of too, because a lot of the projects I've done have yet to be announced. And that is not a rarity for people in this industry, certainly not for show writers. But exactly, let's kind of go over what a show writer does, right? You see all this, what the heck did I do for it? So yeah, what does a show writer actually do? You know, someone that tells you that they're a screenwriter, you kind of get the gist. They're writing screenplays, you know, movies, TV, media. Someone says they're a playwright. Oh yeah, they write plays for the stage. But when I say I'm a show writer, a lot of questions come up because when you're a show writer, you kind of do a lot. I would follow up their question with, what doesn't a show writer do? A show writer writes in a variety of mediums, in a variety of styles, for a variety of experiences. And I sat down and I was thinking, what is that quintessential sentence that really captures what a show writer does? And I came up with this. A show writer writes any creative text, both internal and external, needed to bring a story to life. So yes, internal, you'll be writing those concepts, those treatments that only your creative team will see, meant to get everyone on the same page, etc. But there's also the external side of it, where you're writing guest-facing text, like copy on posters in the queue. Essentially, you're really writing the writing on the walls, prop copy, scripts, of course, things like that. For example, let's say you're writing an experience for like a moment in history where like bunnies took over the world in like the 1920s. Expect that you are going to sit down and write a news article describing the event from the 1920s, things like that. And maybe someone will read it if you're lucky. So I pulled together some examples of things that show writers do that you might not typically think of, as well as the more typical things. So of course I put in my mini golf winter summerland example, my favorite. All of the fun little poems at the beginning of each hole a show writer would have written. I pulled a poster from Slaughterhouse Cinema at Halloween Horror Nights, which was this brilliant technique where before you kind of turned the corner and entered a scene full of mayhem and scares, there was a fun movie poster that kind of described what you were about to get yourself into. A show writer would have done that. There's character meet and greets where a show writer would write the concept and also the copy, maybe on the actual backdrop. I actually wrote that copy there for Mickey. There's spectaculars, which include, of course, the show flows for that, but also the announcements for them. There's stage shows, there's marquee text, safety messaging. Ride treatments, spiels, maybe the OGs even for the rides in some cases. You're also naming menu items, you're coming up with server quips, you're coming up with gags, maybe some backstories for characters. As you can see, a ton of different things. Now, yeah, that kind of is a little overwhelming. So I wanted to pare it down to the three main deliverables that every show writer will come across in their life. Hopefully. If you didn't, let me know. That would shock me. So there's the concept, which is a paragraph pitch of the story premise that is meant to briefly explain and sell the idea. The idea, excuse me. You really want someone to buy into that idea, and you're probably going to be writing multiple of these. And whoever your client is will kind of choose one or two to further onto the treatment. The concept is also called summaries sometimes. So you throw in your summaries. Maybe the client likes two or three. So you get greenlit and you can write a treatment. And a treatment is a detailed document describing the major beats of the experience, and it's usually from a guest's perspective. Um, it could be very long considering the project. It could be very short if it's a short project, of course. And your work might end there from a project. Not all projects call for a script. Not all projects even call for a treatment. But if it does, if you get to the scripting stage, you'll be writing this all-encompassing show script that includes narration, dialogue, technical cues, and potentially more, all depending on the project. Scripts look different for each experience, but don't let that intimidate you. For example, a script for a free roaming experience would look very different from a stage show. Alrighty, are you guys ready for the next slide? So here are some things to note I thought were important to know about show writing, and that show writers aren't always called show writers. Sometimes they're called story development cast members, or they work in story development, narrative development. Sometimes writing is not even done by a show writer, it's done by a show director or a creative director. A lot of the time, the responsibilities of a show writer could be tacked on to another role. There also is no standard industry format for show writing. Usually each firm or company will have its own preferred way to do it. And if you are hired by them, they will of course describe that to you. But if they don't, and the format is in your hands, your goal should be to be clear, concise, and as simple as possible. There's also these things called objective statements, and they're recommended. They're recommended by me and a lot of other people. So it's a simple way to kind of remind your client what the goal is of this project that they asked you to do. Objective statement could be something as simple to write a captivating Halloween experience for families at Mickey's Not So Scary Halloween Party. It really is that simple, and I absolutely recommend it to put on all of your show writing samples. All right, so when you're a show writer, there will be tight deadlines. You are expected to write fast. And for that, I say, don't mull things over in your brain for too long. There is always a second draft. You're always going to get another chance if it's not right. And it's unavoidable. So if you want to be a show writer, expect that you're going to be doing a lot of things very, very fast. There's also, you will be working on multiple projects at once if you're a show writer. And if you're full-time at the very least, and more likely than not, you will be on multiple projects. So you're really gonna have to be able to prioritize, and curveballs are thrown all the time in this industry. So that leads me to the next thing I think is important to note, which is that you have to be able to communicate fearlessly. And I purposely chose the word fearlessly because you really can't hesitate or be scared to kind of say what you need to do. You are a human being, which we'll talk about later too. So sometimes if a curveball is thrown at you, you're gonna have to go to your show director and be like, hey, you asked me to swap out the character of Winnie the Pooh with Clarabelle. I have to restart the script, but there's also 3 treatments due tomorrow that you'd like me to do. what is the priority here? And I will need to extend a deadline for one of these assignments. And that is what you're expected to do. You really have to be able to communicate clearly and effectively and fearlessly, because the only thing hesitating or kind of feeling sorry for yourself that you have to even ask the question, it's just going to cost you time, and you don't have that time. Another thing you have to think about if you want to be a show writer is that you're going to get notes. Notes are unavoidable. So you need to be able to take feedback, and you need to be able to take it well. You should even train yourself to just love feedback. For example, I yearn for feedback now at this point. It's just a great way to kind of get the script going and get your project going. So notes are unavoidable. If you don't like getting notes, you're not going to like being a show writer. And finally, something I think that's important to note is that you are a human being. Writing will take you time, and that is okay. You're gonna make mistakes, and that is okay. Every show writer has made every mistake, and you will too. So don't let a mistake ruin your mojo or affect your work, because that is part of being a human being. Alrighty. So I'm a show writer. I finished my script. I've completed my part of the project. What happens now? You're gonna start a new project. You may get updates of what has happened to the project you just finished, especially if you're in-house at a place like Disney or Universal, but you also might not. You might never hear from the people you wrote for again. You probably will, but you might know the thing you wrote might never happen. It might happen. You might be getting updates along with the public. When you're done, when your script is in, that's kind of like the end of communication for a lot of the projects you'll be working on. Alrighty, so now we are going to talk about writing for theater versus writing for theme parks or themed entertainment. So I also want to say that a disclaimer of sorts, that this is all in my experience. Everything has exceptions, especially in this industry. So definitely keep that in mind. But in my experiences, these are the few things I've noticed at the core of each different type of writing. And for theater, the writer sparks the idea. And for theme parks, the idea is sparked by a need or a client. So I'm a playwright. I was struck with this wonderful idea. So I'm going to go to my room on my computer and I'm going to write the script. And then I'm going to submit it to all these places and see what happens. But when you're a show writer, you are brought into this idea, right? There's usually a need. For example, at Disney, a client would be Magic Kingdom. And Magic Kingdom would come to the creative team and be like, hey, we need a new parade. And we want it to be all about Finding Nemo. I'm making this up. This hasn't happened. And that's kind of where the idea comes to life. Things aren't made in themed entertainment because someone thought it was cool to do. That does happen, but a lot of time it's because there's a need to do it. It's a tad more corporate than theater. There's also the thing that a writer often has full creative control of their play, or at least more creative control than a show writer would have on a show writing project. Show writers are usually partnered with a show director, and the show director has more creative control. As a show writer, you're really helping to see through another person's vision or a shared vision of many. A lot of the time, a show writer might be brought on and the idea already has been made, and the show writer really has no creative say kind of what happens. All right, so writing for theater is solo in nature. You're a playwright, you're kind of writing alone. You're really the main brain. You're giving yourself the notes. It's definitely more solo versus themed entertainment for theme parks. Show writers, you're constantly collaborating. There are a lot of people on your creative team. You might be in a brainstorm with 20 plus people, and it's your job to write down all of those ideas and curate through them and whip up something that was shared and kind of take the best of all and make it some beautiful thing and hand it in that way. So for theater, you can also write more for a more niche audience. There can be a specific group that you're targeting. For example, I could be writing a play for about maybe a queer young adult woman in college for queer young adult women in college. And if a 50-year-old dad shows up, he might not like that. And he might not like the play. And that's fine because it's not for him. But in theme parks, the queer college student and the 50-year-old dad has to like what they're going to see. There has to be a chance for every single person in a family to like it. And in theater, you can write and you can hope that your audience gets your vision because there's more nuance in theater. But in themed entertainment, you really got to ensure the broad appeal. For theater, there's something that I call main event freedom. And for themed entertainment, you really have to be more mindful of time and tone. So when you're writing a play and your play's produced, congratulations, by the way, if that happens, your play is the main event. And people are coming to see your play and your play only. And there's a lot of freedom that comes with that. But when you're a show writer, though someone might be there because they're really excited about your show or the ride or whatever you wrote, you have to understand that this person is also going to want to experience the many other adventures at this theme park that they paid a lot of money to get into. So you really have to respect the time and you really have to respect the tone because you don't want people to be devastated or angry at the end of a theme park show. Typically, I would say. You want them to be energized. You want them to be happy. Imagine if Mickey and the Magical Map had like a devastating ending. No one wants to ride It's a Small World with a heavy heart. It wouldn't be fun that way. And you want anything you write to be fun in a theme park. And there's also this notion that in theater, there is a playbill. People are going to know you wrote that play. But in themed entertainment, no one's going to know that you wrote it. A normal theme park guest will not care that you wrote it. They're not going to seek out your name and they'll never know you touched it. People like me and people like all of you here might care to know and might be very interested in who was the show writer for a themed experience. But if you're trying to be a show writer for the glory of it all, perhaps a different writing medium would be better fit for you. People who are show writers aren't typically in it for the glory because very rarely do people know what they wrote. And that brings me to my advice for aspiring show writers. And I do want to have a little disclaimer for this because it might feel very hard to break into this role. It might feel impossible, but I believe that if you put in the work, and of course I recognize that privilege is involved with that, but at the core of it, if you put in the work, why couldn't this happen for you? This job is competitive, but going full steam ahead with determination, courtesy, integrity, and humility will serve you well. There is room for everyone in this industry, and if anyone tells you otherwise, don't listen to them. If you put in the work, why wouldn't it happen for you? And here is some advice that I have for aspiring show writers. So write. My goodness. You need to back up your claims and aspirations by putting in the work and writing. Sometimes people say they're a show writer and they don't really have any sort of themed entertainment experience to show. And it doesn't have to be professional. You could have a treatment that you wrote for fun. And I think that is enough to back up the claim that you want to be a show writer. You are working towards that goal. Having writing experience, whether it's professional or personal, allows you to gain more trust with your potential clients. And that's what you need. You need your clients to trust you, to hire you to do this service that they need. Sometimes you might not have a ton of professional experience, which is okay. People will take their chance on you if you have the work and have like the talent and you can show your work for it. Also, I say write a treatment. This is just a little Grace tip. A lot of my clients have called me out specifically by saying that they love that I have a treatment in my portfolio, which might mean that a lot of show writers don't include treatments in their portfolios. Do that. Have a treatment in your portfolio because that's pretty much 70% of what you write as a show writer. I also say do group portfolio projects. So yeah, it's really hard to kind of find ways to have the big sort of collaborative experiences in themed entertainment, especially since it is a very collaborative role. So you have to show that you can work in a team. And the best way to do that, if you is to kind of make a team yourself and kind of go full force and get a group portfolio project going. Engage with people on LinkedIn. There's classes, there's competitions. You can really just kind of find a bunch of people who are interested in different things, all come together and knock out a really cool themed entertainment experience portfolio project. I also say it's important to have an online presence. Engage on LinkedIn, show your interest, share things about yourself. Everyone on themed entertainment, for the most part, seems to be very active on LinkedIn, at least in my experience. And it's totally okay for you to make a profile and start commenting on all these things and joining the conversations that are happening. In fact, that will do you well. You'll meet a lot of people that way. I've met a lot of you that way. So absolutely do that. Another thing is a website. My life got 10 times better when I had my website done. It's a huge feat, but when it's done and you're proud of it and you're ready to share, my God, is it a weight off your shoulders. So absolutely start working on a website. I also say network to learn. Please only network to learn. People want to help you, and the best way they can help you is by sharing their experiences. And that's pretty much all they really can do. Please don't network with someone expecting a job. Don't network with someone expecting them to review your website, to review your portfolio. They might offer to do that, and that is an amazing opportunity, but just don't go in thinking you're going to get a huge thing out of it, like a job. You're really there to learn. Nothing more, nothing less. Again, I want to say, as my final word of advice, is to be kind to yourself. This industry is tough. It is not easy to break into. There's a lot of rejection that's a part of it, and things might feel stressful at times. So you really do have to be kind to yourself. You have to be proud of the progress you made, be productive, but really, truly, if things might not seem to be going your way, just be nice to yourself, because that's part of it. There's no real easy one path, and figuring out your own path is difficult. And it's impressive to even kind of go on that journey. So be nice to yourself throughout it. You can do it, truly. If you put in the work, I think you can make anything happen to yourself. You can do this, and there is room for you. So do it if you want to do it. It's the best job in the world. Alrighty, that is the end of my talk. So let's connect if you'd like. Please add me on LinkedIn. Check out my website if you'd like to see an example of a website, or maybe examples of any of the treatments, concepts, scripts that I was talking about today. I also listed some really cool resources that have helped me in my journey, which is the Themed Entertainment Creative Workshop Series, Slice Creative Network, which has a lot of wonderful events that teach you about entertainment, and it's also a great way to network. There's the Themed Entertainment Association. There's also a next gen version of that for college students specifically. Absolutely get involved with that. Also get involved with LinkedIn. A lot of people are so willing to talk to you. You just have to ask. And of course, the internet in general is such a great resource. And resources are growing for the themed entertainment industry every single day. When I first started trying to enter this industry, things like even this were not happening. So things are growing, things are getting better, things are getting bigger. And like I said a million times, there's room for you. Thanks. Thank you, everybody. So I know we have a Q&A session, so let's do that now if you guys have any questions.
Thank you so much, Grace. That was amazing. Thank you all. Please give Grace a round of applause, clapping emojis, and we have a lot of great comments in the chat. So the first question I want to ask Grace was, in what point in the production process of a project, a themed entertainment project, are you brought in? And is the creative director and the show writer position ever overlap? Is there ever any overlap in that, or is there any point where the show writer would actually create the project themselves?
Yeah, there's a lot of sort of like overlap with show writer, show director, creative director. A lot of the time those roles could be combined. In my experience as a show writer, I have been able to come up with the idea from the very ground up and pitch things and have them happen. But most of the time, it's definitely a collaboration. And most of the time, you are really serving someone else's vision. Though you are being hired to sprinkle in your own sort of writing magic, don't be scared to put in your own choices and make moves yourself and pitch things to that person that ultimately has creative control. But yeah, those roles can be combined, those roles can be separate, but usually a show writer is serving someone else. And to answer your question about when a show writer comes into play, most of the time they are at the very beginning. Maybe they are at the very, very beginning when the client comes and asks for or describes their need, or maybe the need and sort of project direction has been decided, and then the show writer is being brought on to kind of continue and see that through.
Well, we have a question from Lou, who asked, from previously in the presentation, asked, is an objective statement a way of encapsulating the show's creative intent?
Yes, that is exactly what it is. You nailed it.
Glad to clear that up. Also, Doug asks, when starting out, are there group writers to be part of, or a type of mentorship, or just thrown into it alone? Essentially asking about resources, which you mentioned a little bit before, but if you know of any like group operations, or do you suggest going about it on your own?
I think you could do it alone. And when I entered the industry, I hadn't ever really had like a show writing for themed entertainment group, though those groups absolutely exist now. A lot of my experience when I entered, I did have writing groups, but they were playwriting. I have a lot of theater experience. Many of my theater friends are here right now. So I have had a lot of group support in writing, but specifically for themed entertainment show writing, I personally never did before I entered the industry. But it is happening now, and those groups do exist. And I'm sure if you wanted to start one, there are so many people, probably a lot of people here, who would be willing to do that group with you.
Awesome. And I have a follow-up question for Doug too, who asks, are there writing teams on projects? Meaning, are there multiple teams writing on the same project, or does that generally fall into one person's job?
I'm sure there are writing teams in my experiences, especially at Disney. There are 3 show writers at Disney. There's 2 wonderful women who are there, and then there's the intern. And those 3 people write projects separately, but can go to each other for advice and kind of pitch ideas back and forth. I'm sure there are writing teams for a lot of experiences, but in my experiences, they really have been more independent than having more than one writer, but your director and your creative director get it, and they are kind of idea partners as well.
Awesome. And we have one more question that we'll go to from Lou. It says, when creating pitches, how important is the writing versus illustration? Can you be successful pitching with writing alone?
Yeah, you can be successful pitching with writing alone. But nothing is, it's hard because when you're writing as the show writer, a lot of the time, like you really aren't seeing what's being illustrated. So they kind of read what you wrote to illustrate. So it is very essential. So you can do it without pictures, but pictures are powerful. And if you can get an illustration in there, it's not going to hurt you. So I would say both hold equal weight. One can be done without the other, but together, it's incredible.
Perfect. Well, thank you. We have one more question. We're going to go to Jen for one question. Jen, if you want to go ahead and unmute your microphone, it'll be our last question of the night.
Well, first of all, your Winter Summerland mini golf, who knew that you did that? That was
Oh, I did not do
fantastic.
that. Oh my goodness. No, no, no. I did
Oh,
not
okay.
do that.
Oh, I thought you
I
did
would have
that.
been a
Sorry.
child. I would have been 1 year old, I swear. So no. But thank you for
Whoever did
thinking.
that did amazing.
Of
um, so my question is, as a show writer, what really helps your creative process that you wish or appreciate that was provided by the client? So is this speaking more upon theme park projects, like do the clients give you any tools or resources to kind of bounce off from? So I'm wondering, what tools are those that you find most helpful?
So yeah, there are a lot of wonderful tools when you are a show writer. So for theme parks, we'll use a Disney example. So let's say Disney, we'll do the Finding Nemo parade example I made up earlier. So there, yeah, you kind of know what you have to do. You know that you need to make a parade, and you know it needs to be about Finding Nemo. So you already have like those two guidelines. Sometimes you don't get any guidelines. Sometimes it's just like, hey, there's an empty stage going on at like Food and Garden. Just put something on there, and then you kind of can go crazy with your ideas. But when you start a project with those guidelines, you of course watch the movie, and Disney gives you that movie for free. You get to watch it sometimes. And there's the internet. You can probably talk to your coworkers, and I would say that the people you work with are the best. I hate to call them tools, but their minds are just impeccable. And to have just any sort of brainstorming session with someone else that is in this industry is so helpful and so wonderful. Personally, when I write, theme park or not, I really like turning to music. I really love watching similar sort of experiences. And I really will go all in and kind of learn about a genre and do extensive research. And the internet allows you to do that so greatly. So hopefully that answered your question.
Yes, thank you.
Awesome. Perfect. There are no more questions. We'll wrap it up here. Thank you again so much, Grace. It's a really incredible presentation. It's incredible to learn about your career in show writing. We really appreciate your time today. And of course, everybody should check out Grace's work on her website and her social media accounts, and keep following this space for future events. So thank you all so much for coming. Thank you again, Grace, and have a good night, everybody.